I had just finished editing the final line of my speech when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number, and I almost ignored it. Spam. Probably. Or one of those last-minute political surveys that always seem to find me during life's milestones. But something made me swipe it open. The message was short. Your son is lying. You have 2 hours to see the truth. Check the toolbox. Beneath it was a photo. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. The familiar green walls, the oil-stained floor, the rust-colored lawn chair we never got around to tossing. It was our garage, my garage taken from the back corner near the tool bench. I stood up so fast I knocked my coffee over. The brown ring spreading across the edge of my note cards. My breath went shallow. The garage had been locked since last weekend. Scott, the neighbor, had borrowed the mower. And I remembered double-checking the padlock when I put it back. No one should have been in there. I moved to the window that overlooked the driveway. The sunlight spilled across the flower beds I'd planted for today, and the white ribbons Jonah had tied last night still fluttered in the breeze. Everything looked exactly the same. Exactly normal. But the photo didn't lie. I walked too calmly to the kitchen drawer and retrieved the garage key from its hook. My fingers trembled only slightly. I didn't grab my phone. I didn't call Jonah. I didn't want to hear my own voice say something I couldn't unsay. The garage door creaked as I opened it. It always did. The smell of motor oil and cardboard hit me like memory. Everything looked untouched, but I walked straight to the toolbox. Red, metal, dented on the left side, where Jonah dropped it years ago. The lock popped open easily. Inside, wrapped in black velvet, was a small box I'd never seen before. Next to it, a cheap flip phone and a manila envelope. I didn't open anything yet. I just stood there, clutching the edge of the table, feeling the truth breathe down the back of my neck like a ghost I hadn't invited. Whatever was inside that box, it was about Jonah, and whoever had sent me that message knew exactly where to hit. I finally lifted the black velvet box from the tray, afraid of what it might contain. Even though I already had a sinking suspicion, it was heavier than it looked. I opened it slowly. Inside was a diamond ring solitaire. Classic. Elegant. Not the one Jonah had given Celeste when he proposed last spring. I remembered that ring clearly oval cut. Rose gold, with tiny pavé diamonds down the band. This one was different, simpler, older, almost vintage. My throat tightened. Why was it here? Hidden in a toolbox in our garage. Wrapped like a memory no one was meant to find. I set the box aside and picked up the flip phone. It was already powered on. No passcode. The screen lit up to a call log. But I didn't look through it yet. I couldn't. Not until I understood what I was holding. At the bottom of the toolbox was a thick envelope. I opened it slowly and slid out a stack of glossy photographs. The first image made my knees buckle. Jonah. Smiling. Not the polite smile he gave Celeste's mother or the forced one during family photos. No, this was real, relaxed, happy. His arms were wrapped around a woman with auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, strands escaping in the wind. They were standing in front of a log cabin, snow on the roof, cheeks red from the cold. Her gloved hand rested on his chest, and there on her ring finger was the same diamond ring. Photo after photo told the same story. Jonah and the woman on a dock, legs dangling above a lake, sharing a beer on the tailgate of his truck, a candlelit dinner in what looked like a rental cabin, her head on his shoulder as he played guitar, a kiss beside a fire pit under a string of backyard lights. And in everyone, he looked content. More than that, he looked in love. I pressed the photos against my chest as if I could stop them from breathing. I didn't recognize her face, but something in the way she looked at him, it felt like she believed she belonged. And maybe, at one point, She did. I set the photographs down, my hands trembling in my lap. The burner phone sat beside them, silent but pulsing with unspoken weight. I hesitated, staring at the scratched plastic casing, before finally pressing the green button. It lit up. No passcode, just a plain screen with a few icons. I opened the voicemail tab. There were 5 saved messages. The newest one was time-stamped today, 6:17 a.m. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room soft, low, threaded with something that sounded like grief, or rage wearing a silk dress. You promised. No one replaces me. Jonah. Not her. Not ever. The next message was shorter. I know what you're doing. I see it. I see everything. My mouth went dry. The voice was so familiar it hurt. I hadn't heard it in nearly 2 years, but I hadn't forgotten it either. Not after the funeral. Not after the endless casseroles and the hollow condolences. Not after watching my son lose the color in his face every time someone said her name. Marla. Marla Greer, Jonah's fiancée, the girl he was supposed to marry before the accident, before the storm that capsized their boat off Lake Somerville, before the Coast Guard searched for 3 days and only found her scarf tangled in a tree branch near the waterline. She was dead. We had mourned her. I had mourned her. And yet, here she was, leaving messages on a burner phone I found buried under paint cans in my garage. The final voicemail began with a long, shaky breath. You think saying, I do, will erase me. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped into something colder. I'm watching. See you at the chapel. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the workbench. I leaned on the table to steady myself. Outside, birds chirped and a breeze stirred the dogwood branches, as if the world hadn't just turned upside down. Marla was alive, and she was coming. I didn't want to believe it. I kept telling myself the voice was similar, not identical, that grief could play tricks, that my mind, stretched thin from wedding day nerves, was finding ghosts in static. But I'd spent months with Marla when she was alive. Dinner tables, backyard cookouts, holidays. I knew her laugh, her cadence, the way she paused before speaking when she was choosing her words carefully. That voicemail wasn't an echo. It was her. I went back inside and locked the front door, heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I pulled out my laptop and opened a private browser window. I needed something solid, something official. The only person I trusted to help without asking questions was Sheila Baines, an old friend from my vice principal days, now working at the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles. I dialed her cell. Sheila, it's Clarissa. I said, I need you to check something for me. Quietly, I gave her the name, Marla Greer. Date of birth, August 13th, 1992. There was a long pause on the other end, a soft keyboard tapping. She renewed her license, Sheila said, finally. 6 months ago, in Arizona. Are you sure she updated her address and photo? Can you send me the photo? A few minutes later, an image arrived in my inbox. She was standing against a pale blue backdrop, chin lifted slightly. Her hair was shorter now, styled differently, but her eyes were the same, wide, sharp, familiar. It was her, no mistaking it. I stared at that face, the face we buried in candlelight 2 years ago, framed on the memorial table with lilies and handwritten notes. The accident, the lake, the empty rescue boats, the scarf in the trees. There had never been a body. No closure, just grief. Now I understood why Jonah never really healed. Maybe he knew, maybe he suspected, or maybe Marla never really left. And now, on the morning of Jonah's wedding, she'd returned. I didn't leave the house. I couldn't not until I understood what kind of storm I was standing in. Upstairs, in the corner of the attic, was a storage bin I hadn't opened in years. We called it the Benedict box. Jonah never touched it. My late husband's things had been packed away after the funeral. His military medals, old journals, some correspondence from people I never recognized. Back then, I hadn't had the strength to sort through the unanswered questions he left behind. But today, strength wasn't a choice. I pried open the lid and sifted through old envelopes, photographs, and receipts. Near the bottom, wrapped in a yellowed cloth, was a cracked leather phone case holding a small, outdated flip phone. To my surprise, it turned on. Only one contact was saved, S. Greer. There were no recent calls, no voicemails, just a few messages dated 29 years ago. The phone used only briefly, then forgotten. I reached deeper into the box. A torn manila folder was tucked between Benedict's discharge papers. Inside it, a photo and a birth certificate. The photo was of Benedict, younger, smiling stiffly as he held a bundled newborn in a hospital room I didn't recognize. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking down at the baby with an expression I couldn't read. The birth certificate had faded at the edges, but the names were still legible. Child's name: Marla Greer, Mother Celine Greer, Father Benedict Duval. I dropped it. Everything I'd seen this morning, the burner phone, the hidden ring, the voicemails, it all collapsed into a singular horror. Jonah had once been engaged to his half-sister, and I had no idea if he knew. My knees buckled as I sat down hard on the attic floor. The insulation scratching through my dress. I had spent my life keeping Jonah safe from his father's mistakes. But this was something I never saw coming. If Marla knew, she could destroy him, not just emotionally, but from the inside out. And she was already on her way to the chapel. I drove to the church on autopilot. The box of photographs beside me in the passenger seat, and the velvet ring box tucked inside my purse. My fingers clenched the steering wheel tighter than necessary. I wasn't headed there to stop a wedding, not yet. I needed answers. I needed to look her in the eye. The bridal suite was quiet when I knocked. Celeste's voice called out softly, "Come in." I stepped inside holding a small, velvet-wrapped box, my mother's pearl comb. A family heirloom I hadn't planned to give anyone. It was just a reason to be there. Celeste sat in front of a full-length mirror, her white dress cascading around her like foam. Her hair was pinned high, her makeup flawless. She looked radiant. She also looked like she hadn't taken a full breath in 20 minutes. Her hands fidgeted in her lap when she saw me. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I brought something for you," I said, keeping my voice even. I handed her the comb, and she reached for it with hands that trembled slightly. "I thought it might bring a little calm," I added, then sat down beside her. We sat in silence for a beat. I studied her profile. She was trying too hard to appear composed. "Celeste," I said gently, "does the name Marla mean anything to you?" She froze, her jaw clenched, eyes locked on her reflection. She didn't blink. She started, but her voice caught. Then she set the comb down, turned toward me, and folded her hands. "I sent the message," she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't say anything. She came back 6 months ago. I only found out because she followed us. Jonah didn't even know at first. She was obsessed, angry, said he belonged to her. He tried everything. He blocked her, changed numbers, even went to the sheriff, but nothing worked. She reached for a tissue and dabbed the corners of her eyes. He thought this wedding might give us some legal ground to push her out for good. I stood slowly, the weight of her words pressing against my spine. Jonah hadn't told me any of this, not a single word, and now the clock was running out. I found Jonah alone behind the church, pacing beside the maintenance shed in his tuxedo shirt, the bow tie still untied around his neck. His hair was tousled from running his hands through it too many times, and his jaw clenched with every step. He didn't hear me approach. When I said his name, he spun around, startled, then sagged at the sight of me. "Mom," he said, "I didn't want you to know. Not today." I walked closer, my heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. Too late for that. He glanced away, then ran a hand down his face. She showed up out of nowhere, said she'd been watching us, that I owed her. She said if I didn't call off the engagement, she'd ruin everything. Go to the press, claim I used her, claim Celeste knew. He shook his head like he was trying to dislodge a nightmare. I tried ignoring her, then reasoning with her, but she's not the same. Mom, not since she came back. It's like something snapped. I folded my arms tightly. So you planned a wedding to get away from her? He nodded. Celeste offered. Said if we married, I'd have stronger legal ground. Marla wouldn't be able to claim anything, not emotionally, not financially. It was a way out. I didn't expect her to show up today. I stared at him. This son I had raised. This man standing in front of me looking both older and younger than he had yesterday. Jonah, I said quietly. Did you ever wonder why Marla disappeared so completely after the accident? Why there were gaps in her story? His brows drew together. What do you mean? I opened my purse and handed him the birth certificate. He looked down, read the names, and blinked in stunned silence. She's Dad's daughter, I said, from an affair. That makes her your half-sister. Jonah went pale. The paper trembled in his hand as if it had weight. He staggered back and sat on a wooden crate, face crumpling. I didn't know, he whispered. God, I didn't know. I sat beside him, steadying my voice. And now she's back. And I don't think she knows either. The music had started. The guests were seated inside the chapel. Soft strings filled the air. And somewhere in the back, Celeste's bridal party was lining up. I stood near the front pew, every muscle in my body taut, my eyes scanning the stained glass windows like they could tell me what would happen next. Then I saw her, through the chapel's side window, just beyond the iron fence. A woman in a long beige coat stood perfectly still. Her blonde hair, shorter than it had once been, was pinned behind her ears. She wasn't trying to hide. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't crying. She was watching. In her hands, she held a manila envelope, gripped flat against her chest like a shield or a final move, and she was looking directly at me. My stomach dropped. It was her, Marla. I turned my head and caught the eye of someone 3 rows back, Sheriff Dina Maris. She'd been my friend since our boys were in Little League. And even in her Sunday dress, I knew she could still read a room faster than any badge in the county. I gave her a single nod. She rose silently and slipped down the aisle. When she reached me, she didn't speak. I whispered, "She's outside the fence. No weapon, but she's not here to make a scene." Dina didn't blink. Then what is she here for? I didn't answer right away, because I knew she wasn't here to scream or beg or plead. Marla had always been careful. She planned things, crafted them like puzzles only she could solve. She's not here to crash the wedding, I said quietly. She's here to finish something she started. Dina slid out through the chapel's side door. I didn't follow. I just stayed rooted to the floor, staring through the stained glass, heart pounding in a rhythm that no music could cover. Outside, Marla didn't move. She just stood at the fence, the envelope still in her hands, her eyes never leaving mine as the chapel doors opened to begin the procession. I waited until the final note of the processional drifted into silence before I stood. The chapel was hushed, all eyes on Jonah as he stood beneath the arch of flowers, his posture stiff, eyes fixed forward. Celeste had just reached him, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. I stepped into the aisle. 1 foot, then the next. Whispers rippled behind me, but I didn't stop. I reached the altar and leaned in close to Jonah, My voice barely carried over the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears. "She's outside," I said, "and I know the truth. All of it." His shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in relief. Celeste looked at me, searching my face, then gave the smallest nod. I turned to face the congregation. "I'm sorry," I began, voice steady, "but this wedding cannot continue for reasons that are deeply personal and deeply legal." Gasps echoed through the pews. One woman stood up. Someone dropped a program. I saw our pastor frown in confusion, then step back as if giving me space to speak. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. Jonah lowered his gaze, his hands falling to his sides. Celeste reached for his arm, but didn't say a word. She stood beside him, grounded, quiet, the way a real partner stands when the storm breaks. Sheriff Dina re-entered through the side door and gave a subtle shake of her head. Marla was gone. I turned my eyes to the window. The spot by the fence was empty now. No figure, no envelope, no trace she'd ever been there, but she had been. And what she left behind was more than a scene or a threat. It was a wound too precise to ignore. The guests began to murmur in confusion. Some rose to leave. Others lingered, waiting for an explanation I wasn't willing to give, not here. Not yet. Jonah reached out and took my hand. I held it tightly. We didn't speak. We just stood together at the altar that would no longer hold a wedding. And in that silence, we chose the truth over the performance. 3 weeks have passed. The church is quiet now. The ribbons are gone. The whispers have faded into secondhand stories. And the guests have returned to their lives with only a strange anecdote about a wedding that wasn't. I sit in my art studio with the windows open, morning light spilling across the floorboards. The smell of turpentine lingers faintly in the air. Jonah bought me new brushes last week, said I needed something to reclaim. Something just mine. He's in therapy now. Twice a week, sometimes more. The DNA test confirmed what the paper in the attic already knew. Marla was his half-sister. She disappeared after the ceremony. No credit card activity, no phone trail. But a few days ago, a manila envelope arrived at Jonah's apartment. No return address, postmarked from New Mexico. Inside was a notarized letter. She claimed she hadn't known until recently, until after she returned. After she saw Benedict's name on old documents stored in a safe deposit box under her mother's name, she wrote that it broke her, that it didn't erase what she felt, that she loved Jonah still, and that love, twisted or not, was the only real thing she had ever known. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't promise to disappear forever, but she said she would not return unless Jonah invited her to. He won't. I didn't respond. There's nothing more I owe her, but there was something I owed myself. And to Jonah. I went to the courthouse last Monday and signed the paperwork to transfer what remained of Benedict's estate savings. Land rights. A few residual investments to a nonprofit that provides legal and psychological support for adult survivors of incest and family manipulation. I signed it with my full name because I'm no longer hiding from the parts of my family I didn't choose. I couldn't protect Jonah from bloodlines, but I could give him boundaries. I could give him space to rebuild a life not tangled in shame or secrets. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is truth.